I'd like to call the committee of the whole for Tuesday, July 18th, 2017 to order with roll call, please.
Betts.
Here.
Kostler.
Here.
Cavelli.
Here.
Kraus.
Here.
McAlpine.
Here.
Weinhammer.
Here.
Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'll now enter the public comment section. Is there anybody here that wants to address the village board on anything other than what's on the village agenda? We'll go ahead and close public comments. A discussion regarding the village's electrical aggregation program. Jake?
Thank you, Mayor. Try to get through this one here pretty quick. In 2012, the village had approved an aggregation program, saw significant savings for our residents. We renewed a program in 2014 through the aggregation program, electrical aggregation program. The pricing that we got from our contractor or vendor had inched closer to the ComEd rate. Here with that program that was approved in 2014, it's going to be expiring here later this fall. We went out and worked with our consultant NIMEC to get an idea of what the pricing would be. And before you'll see the spreadsheet here. And to just, I guess, make it a short conversation is we're not able to beat the base rate for ComEd. So you can see on the top here, the default rate for ComEd right now is 6.6 cents per kilowatt hour to 7.6 cents per kilowatt hour. There's a PEA factor, the purchased electricity adjustment factor, that varies from the base rate of about half a cent. So the base rate is about 7.1 cents per kilowatt hour. You can see here the lowest bid that we had received was with Dynegy at 7.3. And so given this information, I don't recommend that the village extend the aggregation program. This is something that we'll continue to look at here and expect in early 2018, so sometime in the May-June period. We'll reach out to NIMEC again and ask them just to grab some rates for us again here, and we can look at it. So with that said, we'll work to get information out here to our residents and just let them know where we're at here, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
You might get some solicitor permits as a result of dropping off the aggregation program.
We certainly will. And the chief does a great job in letting us know when he receives those so we can try to get information about solicitors being out in the community and educate our residents.
Think no other questions for that? We'll now enter a public hearing to consider the approval of a variance for a wall sign for Kojaks for the property located at 700 Northwest Highway. Is there anybody here besides the petitioner with regards to the signage? Were you working with the petitioner? Okay, well, this is, if you're going to be in opposition or speaking like that, you could speak in that. So I would, okay. So we'll call on you in just a moment, okay?
Thank you, Mayor. The request this evening is for, as the Mayor mentioned, is a variation request for the Kojaks restaurant. They're relocating into the Cary Square Shopping Center. They're seeking a variation for a wall sign that's larger than what our sign code currently permits. Brief overview of the signage that's proposed for the restaurant. The shopping center has two frontages, one to Northwest Highway and a second to Three Oaks Road. Is permitted to have a monument sign that fronts both of those roadways. There is an existing monument sign that faces Northwest Highway where they have multiple tenants on that sign, other tenants that are in the shopping center, and there currently is no sign that is posted along Three Oaks Road. As part of the project, Kojaks would have another tenant panel on that monument sign along 14, and they're seeking to relocate their existing sign from the downtown location along the Three Oaks Road frontage that would comply with sign requirements for size and setback in that area. They also are seeking to install two facade signs, one both on the north that faces Three Oaks Road frontage. That sign, as proposed, is 72 square feet in area. and would comply with the maximum size requirements for a sign facing that roadway. The way our sign ordinance is drafted, signs are limited based off the linear frontage of the building or tenant space that the sign is going to be installed upon. The rear of the store that faces Three Oaks Road actually has a longer linear frontage than the front of the store that faces Northwest Highway. So the maximum size that they would be able to install a sign in the north facade facing Three Oaks Road is 72 square feet per our code. So no variances are required for that sign. The south facade, which faces Route 14, that frontage is, again, narrower than the rear of the store just due to the odd shape of the shopping center. The proposed sign that they're seeking to install is the exact same sign that would be installed on the north facade of 72 square feet, would exceed the maximum that's permitted of 45 square feet. So this evening, they're seeking a variance to increase the size of that south wall sign from 45 to 72 square feet, or roughly 30 feet. This slide shows the existing conditions of the shopping center as viewed from Route 14, where that facade or sign would be located. You can see the tenant space on the right-hand side of this image, which is the former lighting store. With the rest of the center, there are various triangular breaks in the roof where other tenants have installed signs. You have the Atletico sign and also the Papas Vario sign as well that are in those areas, and they would be proposing a similar sign, channel under sign, to be consistent with the existing makeup of signs that are in the shopping center from that standpoint. This slide shows a rendering of what the sign would look like when installed in the building. Again, due to the shape of the sign, the way our sign code reads, which is similar to other sign codes as far as how they're drafted. Sign areas are calculated based off drawing a geometric shape around the entire sign. So if you're looking at the curved lettering that is proposed of the Kojak symbol, you would draw a single rectangle around the entire sign. So there are dead space or areas that do not include signage within that rectangle that would count towards the area calculation. The petitioners provided information this evening that basically indicates that removing those areas would actually decrease the sign face area down to the approximate 45 square foot that's permitted by code. The sign ordinance provides various standards that need to be met in order to support a variance, which are summarized by the slide. Essentially, the hardship was created by unique circumstances relating to the individual case, not the general conditions in the district. Sign is impractical or impossible if built under the standards of this title. Applicant not taking any action that has caused the extraordinary condition. The relief proposed will not alter the character of the locality and generally is proposed as in harmony with the general purpose and intent of the village's regulations. Based off the shape of the shopping center and the unique circumstances related to this tenant space, with the sign code permitting a larger sign along Three Oaks Road, then based off its frontage along 14 and also the further setback the space has from 14 compared to the other tenant spaces in the shopping center. Staff believes that there may be a hardship in this case related to the sign request and would recommend, should the committee of the whole determine that the sign complies with the variance standards as presented in the previous slide, would recommend approval of the following motion. Approval of variance to increase the maximum area for a wall sign for Kojak's Restaurant for the subject property, subject to the condition that the sign be limited to a maximum square foot area of 72 square feet. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding the request, but the petitioners also here can provide additional information regarding business location here in the sign request this evening.
Any comments for Brian? How about for the petitioner themselves?
I wish there was a euro instead of a burger pictured. but what's that?
That's how we inherited it.
In seriousness though, this is going to be yellow? Is that the okay?
That'd be orange.
Orangish.
Be yellow.
What color is it going
Could
to
you
be?
guys come up to the and just
Swear, man.
yeah.
swear them in?
Sure. Since this is a public hearing, we're going to ask you to be sworn in by our attorney.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God.
Absolutely.
And if you could just state your name and address for the record, that would be great.
All right, I'm Carrie Shupe. Oh, address?
Yes.
840 Wild Rose Drive, Cary.
Thank you.
I'm Matt Steineck from Steineck's Company on 508 Cary, Algonquin.
Did
I
Trustee
feel bad
Jeff-
now. I didn't mean to have you get called up and sworn in, but it was more to Brian. I just was wondering about the color of the sign, and I'm not against it. My point I was trying to make is that they're all red on that building, and they all look the same, and it makes it look cheap, so I'm glad that you're going with a different color. That's the only point I wanted to.
Well, Athletico is actually
White.
white with like a blue framing around it.
Well, I'm glad you're not going with the red. So,
I think it is unique circumstances, just how it's set up there, that it wouldn't fit for you to go straight across anyway. So I think you do meet the guidelines.
Yeah, I thought it was important. We are, if you look at the whole of the center, we're not larger than the Athletico
Right.
sign, and we are further back than Athletico is from Highway 14. And we just thought it was very important to keep our logo, our brand together, what we've been known for.
I think it looks nice.
Any other comments or questions for the petitioner? All right, thank you. So
The hardest part was swearing in.
can we move this to the consent agenda for the next village board meeting?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Next is consider approval of an application for an outdoor seating at the food and drink establishments that serve alcohol, Kojaks Incorporated Restaurant, 700 West Northwest Highway.
She didn't move far back in the audience, so I'll be inviting Carrie back up here in a minute. But Kojak's, again, is requesting this evening for approval of an outdoor dining area related to the restaurant. It was one item that was discussed earlier this year when they went through and previously discussed with the village, the request for the revolving loan fund, and also the liquor and gaming license requests that they intended to install an outdoor dining area as part of their expansion plans. Per village regulations, I'll go briefly into this. The outdoor dining area is proposed on the north side of the building along the Three Oaks Road frontage. There's a landscape area that is immediately behind the tenant space where there's basically a grassy area and a tree that provides some screening of the building that they would propose to install the proposed patio. This images basically show that location. The tree that is existing there would remain. The deck would actually be built around the tree from that standpoint. And then various tables and umbrellas would be provided in the outdoor dining area as well for patrons to be able to sit at and enjoy their meal. Per village code, outdoor dining areas for establishments that serve alcohol requires board approval. If Kojak's did not have a liquor license, they would not have to go through the process this evening for discussion. They would just have to meet the regular zoning requirements for the construction of an outdoor dining area. Provisions here summarize some of the requirements within our code as far as the construction or appearance of an outdoor dining area for a business which serves alcohol, has limits on the hours of operation, limits the volume of music that could be within the outdoor seating area, illumination, and then providing a physical barrier around the dining area. There will be a guardrail provided around the dining area, and then there's existing fence that exists around the former lighting store tenant space that would be provide that break for patrons to get into that area. Staff believes that the proposed outdoor dining area complies with the requirements and standards established within the village code, and is therefore recommending this evening the committee of the whole recommend approval of the request to the village board. Again, the petitioners here can provide additional information or answer any questions regarding the proposal as presented.
Anybody have any questions for staff? Everybody on board, put this on the consent agenda for the next village board meeting?
Yes.
Thank you. 2 out of 3. Now, discussion regarding a facade grant for Kojaks Incorporated for 700 West Northwest Highway.
Thank you again, Mayor. Village Board, this request is again related to petitioner's build out of the space. I don't have slides prepared for this one, but essentially when staff originally met with the petitioner back late last year, September time period, discussed various options that they would have as far as improvements to the space. And then, as far as licensing requirements for the liquor license, gaming licenses, and then various improvements they wanted to perform to the space. And at the time, the village had a grant program that we had established, then also applied for the revolving loan fund, which was approved earlier this year. The petitioner is seeking this evening for consideration request for a grant for the facade improvements that would be related to the exterior build out of the proposed deck area, and then also the installation of the sign. Total improvements that, as proposed, would be roughly $28,000 in costs, which under the grant program, we had a match of up to $10,000 in assistance if the village board wanted to participate in the project. Advised the petitioner that we did recently have discussions regarding village incentive offerings, and due to the history of discussions that we had, wanted to present that request to this evening. I'll allow the petitioner to come up and provide their information as far as why they're seeking the approval this evening, and then be happy to answer any questions you may have, and also the petitioner as well.
Before we did that, I was a little, I guess for lack of another word, concerned when I saw this appear on the agenda. I thought we were kind of doing a moratorium on the facade improvement grants to decide exactly what we wanted to do with this. And I believe that we had the majority of the board wanted to convert this from a grant program to a low-interest loan program for facade improvements, if I'm not mistaken. And I'm hesitant. I know that I just wanted to get some feedback from you or the board with regards to moving forward on this, because we did have a healthy conversation with this, and I wanted to make sure that we have all of our ducks in a row with regards to this, because we have had some questions thrown our way as to the process.
Yeah.
We're trying to, I know that we had talked about putting that on a later agenda, but I just wanted to find out from you about this.
Excuse me, I will address that. The village staff has informed the petitioner of the discussions that the village board has had. Based on my understanding and Director Simmons' understanding, is that the village board has terminated the facade grant program here, and we're encouraging folks to utilize the low-interest loan program that we have here at the Village of Cary. The petitioner, as Director Simmons had indicated, had asked about the program previously, and aside from getting the information that we have terminated the program, still wanted to proceed here and bring this forward to the village board. Staff is not recommending approval based on previous village board direction, but we wanted to bring it forward for you to have the opportunity to consider and review this application.
I was surprised to see it on the agenda too. I'm a definite no on this. I thought we had decided it already, so.
Correct, just with the previous conversations with the petitioner going through the process that dated back to before the village board made that decision. That's why we wanted to provide the petitioner this opportunity to come before you, so.
If I think the petitioner wants to talk to us, she should be able to address us, but I do think that we kind of did say we're putting a moratorium on it until we revisited it and see where we're at and how we wanted to do things. But I think that if they are here and they want to present to us, we owe them the opportunity to at least talk to all of us.
I have no problem with that.
Thank you. I left my glasses at home, so I'm just going to hold it up a little bit like this. But I knew there was division here, and I knew the program, this program was uncertain, the future of it. So I just wanted to say something. I did not know if anything was for sure, but I wanted to speak on behalf of business owners and any other future business owners that may be here in this exact position. So I am here tonight to respectfully request $10,000 through the Business Improvement Assistance Program. I also understand that the assistance is decided on a case-by-case basis, and Brian already told you the total amount of ours, which includes a 35 by 20-foot deck on the Three Oaks side. I wanted to give you a couple of perspectives, two for sure, that may hopefully change some minds. The first perspective is a monetary perspective, and I know business owners and village are both concerned about monetary perspectives. The assistance should not be considered a handout or free money or business welfare. This is an investment by the village in the success of each business owner. These investments that are made by the village, whether they are a sales tax incentive plan, a business loan, or a facade grant program, are good for the business owner as well as the village and community as a whole. Businesses who expand or our startups need the support of our community to survive and be successful. Business bank loans are very difficult to attain and mostly impossible for restaurants. Many business owners end up using their life savings, 401ks, and other personal assets to make their business dream a reality. In return, businesses should be supported for their efforts because they provide needed services and goods and help to keep personal taxes lower. These investments made by the village are always brought back to the community in an indirect manner. Look at the current empty buildings and vacant units that we have sprinkled throughout Cary. Those are not providing the maximum revenue that Cary should receive through utility taxes, property taxes, or sales taxes. I will use Kojaks as a case in point. For example, we are asking for $10,000 in investment from the village, but with the expansion of our restaurant and moving to our new location, we will be returning that investment of yours of $10,000 back to you within 1 year by way of the following. The first one is sales tax revenue. I've estimated based on our present sales that we make, not our expected larger revenue generation when we move, but this amount represents $6,308 a year that the village will receive from Kojaks. That amount represents the 0.75% of the total 7% sales tax rate. I include that total amount because we could have moved our restaurant anywhere, but we chose to remain in Cary. We live in Cary, our friends live in Cary. There's no other place we want to be. Secondly, property tax. We have taken a unit that has been vacant for approximately 10 years and enhanced the value of this property by over $200,000 just from the improvements that are being made, not to mention the additional value that will be added to the property once it is completed. I'm not able to give you a definitive property tax amount, but the village will receive 5.14% of the higher property tax that will be added due to the improvements. Utility taxes, to include electric utilities, Comcast, telecommunications, and cable. I don't have the data, no values placed for this item either. And last, gaming. The average gaming return to the village per business is approximately $3,000 a year. These numbers can be found on the state website. The $3,000 return to the village is based on a conservative amount of gaming revenue of $5,000 a month that is then divided between state, business, and village, with the village receiving 5% of the total. And I want to remind the board that this return on investment recurs annually. The second perspective is a competitive perspective. To remain competitive as a business community, we must have a similar commercial landscape as our surrounding communities. All of our neighboring communities offer these incentives to their business partners, like Zurich, Huntley, Woodstock, Lake in the Hills, Crystal Lake, and Fox River Grove. In fact, the facade improvement program in Fox River Grove is up to $50,000. I think all Cary residents would be proud to live in a business-friendly community. I thank you for your attention and respectfully ask that you grant our request.
Do we have any questions for the petitioner? This is a tough one. I guess what I want to relay is that the board has taken an active approach is to look at this program. And in order for us to be fair to everybody else moving forward, we wanted to put together some guidelines. I don't think that, I was wondering, I was going to ask the board if this is something that we could table until a future date and maybe expedite a discussion with regards to this at one of the next two village board meetings as to the direction that we want to go with this program. I don't want to haphazardly, because this board was emphatic about it before about putting a moratorium on it. And I want to be fair to you. We're thrilled that you're staying here. I think that we gave you a nice rate on your low interest loan for your improvements in the restaurant. The variations that we afforded you this evening shows that we are in tune with what our businesses want. But in order for us to collectively do something that will help propel us, for the future businesses that you're talking about that may want to come here, we want to really make sure that we have something that's sound. And that's the advice that we had gotten from the board before. If the board wants to, interject here or have further discussion with regards to this, but that was the direction I thought that we had taken before. I understand where Trustee Kraus is at, Trustee McAlpine
Well,
or
I mean-
Costler.
Go ahead, Jim. First. Okay. I'll go. In reality, of course, you make a compelling, I don't think anyone here is going to say it's not a compelling argument that you're making. It is, but I think that what's happened is that we didn't have things defined well enough. And, we looked at some of the other surrounding communities, like a Crystal Lake, for example, who did it and said, hey, it was only for sales tax revenue generating. And that makes perfect sense when you say it's a return on the investment that's going to come back to us. I just think timing is unfortunately not on your side right now with this board, because we've not had that discussion to decide if we're going to revisit that at all and have any parameters that it works. For right now, we said we're taking a moratorium on it because we just did not feel that we had proper notice to all of our businesses and that we could be fair in doing that. I mean, that's my understanding. Everyone please chime in, and if I'm incorrect in that, I'm very open to anyone else's thoughts on it, because I certainly want to always be business friendly.
Trustee Costler, do you have any comments?
I think what it all comes down to is funding. The facade improvement grant program continues in the essence of if there are funds available for it to be given out. And when I look to our next year's budget, there is just such a big hole there that I personally cannot, in good faith, give out funds which we need to operate next year. And that's where I come from. So
I agree both with Ellen and with Jim that we need to look at our funds, especially our operating funds for next year.
So are you saying that you're going to turn this into a loan fund, so this would be separate? Because my other loan that I received was only based upon the number of new jobs that I was bringing to the restaurant.
Well, that's yet to be determined. That's what the board is going to decide as to what it's going to be. The last I had heard, we had put a moratorium on it, and we were going to do away with the actual grant program, that we would look at it for a low-interest loan. So until we make a determination, I don't think that we can make that decision for you right now. And what we can do is try to expedite a board-level conversation with the direction that we want to go. I know that staff has spent some time over the last 4 weeks or so researching what other communities are doing so that we can remain competitive and have an understanding what works for them. And as the information comes in, we'll be able to make a better decision that will help all of us, prosper.
Well, I would say from staff's perspective, I mean, we've heard village board feedback through this process, and we've been telling folks that the facade loan is not available here. The revolving loan fund, that is available, for folks if they want to submit a request for that.
Trustee Weinhammer or Cavelli, any comments on that?
I mean, I agree with Ellen and Jim, so.
Yeah, everything's already been said. I agree with everyone else.
Okay. So we will, I would encourage you to follow what's going on and encourage you to evaluate your position when we make a determination if that's something that you feel that you want to move forward with once we have a concrete program in line.
Okay, so you're saying in the future that even if it is passed and the deck is up and completed and everything's gone, I can still
Well,
come back?
I don't think that would, I'm speaking for myself, but I think that, you presented a great case. You really have. It's very compelling. You're taking a great leap within the village, and I'm sure that you're going to prosper. But I think that from what the board, they like what they see, and I think that they would be, if we come up with a program and she comes back and says, I'm back for this, would you be opposed to her coming back to get reimbursed?
I have a quick question. So if you don't get the grant, which is the direction the board is going right now, are you not going to do the sign or the deck then?
Oh, no, we're still going forward. It's
Okay.
just, well, no, it's, any little tiny bit that we get is so appreciated and so helpful, because when somebody moves, they're taking a big risk. And the great thing about, like, the business loan that you gave, it's such a low interest rate. And what does that do? That gives us breather room so that we don't have these giant loan payments right up front that we have to worry about. And, and they're low payments, and we can focus on the business and, work on getting everything, smoothly running. And bank financing, nobody wants to loan to a restaurant. So we do guerrilla financing. We go out there and find other ways, and we're paying much higher interest rate. So yeah, I am scraping around for any little bit that I can find that allows us to have a little bit of breather room. You don't want to open up your new business and go, okay, everything is perfect. We can make it. So it's just, that's why we're looking for things like this. I'm not begging for a free handout. I'm just looking for everything that I can possibly, I'm able to afford to get.
Well, I think if I can get a thumbs up or thumbs down from the board about adding that being reimbursed for previous expenditures to enhance the business, is that something that we would consider maybe perhaps for Kojaks until we come up with a decision as to the direction that we want to go?
Are you saying being reimbursed without a loan attached to it, just because that's
No, I
back
mean-
to the grant?
Well, whatever we decide as a board, I
If we
don't
could be
think it's-
retroactive, is what you're saying? Can we go retroactive because she was here? Is that what we're asking?
that's, go ahead,
With the revolving loan fund,
Yeah.
we advanced the money so
Correct.
they could make capital investments in the
Correct.
business. I think in my experience, since we've been here, each of the revolving loan fund loans have been to advance the money so they can make capital expenses. We aren't replacing an existing loan with a new loan. We aren't refinancing the money they've already spent. The question is whether or not, in the course of evaluating your business incentive program, whether you would allow businesses to apply only for prospective expenses or apply for reimbursement of past expenses also. Now, certainly applying for past reimbursement of past expenses means they're investing the money at their own risk, because the application process is, I imagine, going to be somewhat discretionary. But it's up to you whether or not you want to open the application process to people who are making prospective investments or are asking for reimbursement.
I think we have an issue if we open it up to past projects, because correct me, Brian, if I'm wrong, but all these funds have to be under, any labor has to be prevailing wage for the revolving loan fund?
Any improvements to a space that would be prevailing wage would apply. So it would be
Yeah.
basically an improvement to the building would act as a public act or public improvement.
So it would be, I mean, it would still be on the onus of whoever came retroactively to get monies, but that just really complicates the whole issue.
I think it puts the village board in a tough spot here if we're going retroactive. I mean, I don't like that. I mean, it's the village board's decision on that, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Jeff, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm not in favor of these grants anymore.
Right.
Simply because we have the revolving loan fund. If we continue to give out the grants, eventually we're not going to have any money left for the revolving loan. So then we're left with nothing.
Right.
So I want to just stick with the,
And that's
low
where,
interest loan.
that's where the grant would come from. It would come from the revolving loan fund.
But it would be a low, I don't think that it would be a grant money. It would be a low-interest loan if that's the direction I believe that the board has said that they were going to go.
Well,
But-
let me ask you this, and let me just for clarification, because they've already come before us and they're getting a low interest rate loan based upon job creation, because that's how that is set up. Are we saying that we're going to look at another program under the revolving loan program that doesn't have to do with hiring? You know, that could be for improvements? Does that, you know what I'm saying? That has nothing to do with, you know, someone, in other words, is looking to do facade improvements, but they want a loan on it, not a grant. Are we, that would be separate from the revolving loan program that's in place right now, because that is definitely tied to employee, you know, who we're employing. So I guess that's my question. I think that's what maybe we're looking for direction on is, would we be entertaining something like that? And I don't know the answer to that because we have not had that discussion.
The dollars are released for however.
Right, so we can do
the village
whatever we
board wants to
want.
use them.
how much was this loan that we gave?
75.
75?
Yeah.
I mean, my thought is then this probably should have been an $85,000 loan and included this part of it
Right,
in that.
like, for
And I'm sorry
example-
that you were brought here tonight because I thought we had already decided too that we weren't going to move forward with any more grants.
Yeah, because 750 Kachina, I think they received 150.
Right.
Or
Yeah,
somewhat,
because
yeah.
they were
125.
brand new.
125.
Right.
And I was existing, so I didn't get to count any of my existing my employees.
Right, so yours was,
Oh, I
yours was
see.
more,
Yeah,
you
that's
took,
why
you
it's
got the
smaller.
maximum that you could get based upon the revolving loan fund that we had set up on the new employees that you're adding.
Right.
Whereas you're saying that had you known that this was going to happen, you would have, if you had you been able to apply for 85, you'd applied for an $85,000 loan. I think that's just where we're in a little bit of a, I can understand your questioning on that.
Any other comments from the side? I think that you can understand that we're at an impasse here right now with what the direction we want to go. And we need to have a healthy conversation at the board level is what's going to be right for us moving forward and what's going to be the most benefit for businesses coming into town. So I think that, you know, until we have that discussion and we can come up with some clear-cut parameters and what our goals and objectives are, I don't think that we can make a commitment on that right now.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Now a discussion regarding the village's revolving loan fund for the Cary Ale House.
Thank you, Mayor. Village Board. The request this evening is for a request from the Cary Ale House and Brewing Company for a proposed expansion of their existing operation in the downtown area. Brief program history for new board members that are not familiar with the revolving loan fund program, but in 1987, the village received a grant from the state of Illinois that was intended to be utilized towards the revolving loan fund program. Between 1990 and 2006, there were over 19 loans that were granted by the village to local businesses for various improvements that they had performed. No loans had been expanded after 2006, and then in 2016, we re-implemented the revolving loan fund program where a revolving loan, recapture strategy was adopted by the board. Loan was granted to 750 Cucina, and then most recently this year to Kojaks for their proposed expansions, new facilities. And then in October of last year, the village received a determination from the state of Illinois that we were no longer tied to their reporting requirements, so that we could utilize the funds as at the village's discretion. So it could be utilized for continuing the revolving loan fund program, or the monies could be transferred into the general fund for other purposes as seen fit. As of today, there's a fund balance of over $316,000 in the revolving loan fund. We've, again, expended 2 loans out to local businesses that have a balance of presently of $191,000. A few recapture strategy highlights. The loan minimums that are established is a minimum loan that we would issue would be $15,000 for a business, established a maximum of $150,000. 2 loans, again, have been issued thus far, one for $125,000 to 750 Cucina, and the second of $75,000 to Kojaks. We require a 2-to-1 funding match for the loans, so for every dollar that we loan out, we require 2 be provided from outside funding sources, either from the applicant themselves or another funding mechanism. And we establish a maximum term of 7 years to allow for the replenishment of that fund for the payments of those loans off. Interest rates are based off the current rates or yield for the U.S. Treasury securities. And for every $15,000 loan that is loaned to a business, we require that it create 1 full-time equivalent job. So if that's 1 full-time employee or 2 part-time employees, that it would equate to 1 full-time equivalent position. And then the requirement is that 51% of the jobs created are low mod income to qualify for the loan. Eligible program expenses are summarized in the slide. Essentially, construction of new facilities, purchase of equipment, leasehold improvements, and working capital are eligible for the loan based off the recapture strategy that the village, adopted. Ineligible program expenses would include refinancing existing debts, finance activities for speculative purposes, conducting marketing activities, things along the lines as shown on the slide. It's intended to be an assistance to businesses, kind of a bridge gap loan where in areas where they might not be able to get financing from other means, so that a business would be able to expand locally and then replenish the funds so that as payments come back to the village, that we can again use it in the future for other businesses to then utilize the funds. This evening, the Cary Ale House Brewing Company is seeking a request or consideration of the use of funds to assist with the restaurant expansion. Not relocation, they're not moving. They're performing over $215,000 worth of improvements for their brewery expansion. Over the next 2 years, they will be looking to create about 2 full-time and 5 part-time positions, and based on salaries proposed, would be eligible for the program. They're seeking a 7-year loan of $60,000, which would be the maximum permitted based off the employees generated, and the current interest rate is 2.2%. This evening, we're seeking direction from the board regarding the loan request, and if concurrence from this committee would direct staff to draft a resolution with appropriate loan terms for future consideration by the village board. Members of the Ale House are here as well to provide some overview as far as proposed expansion plans. Essentially, this slide indicates the proposed expansion into the adjacent storefront next to their existing location. They're proposing to construct the brewery in the front of the store so that it would be visible along Main Street. And then also within the existing restaurant, there would be various improvements on the first floor, other improvements throughout the space as well. And then they would have minor modifications to the elevations for the building as well for the proposed expansion. With that, I'll be happy to turn it over to the petitioners to provide more information on their requests and their proposed expansion plans. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have, or if you have questions for the petitioner, they can answer as well.
Thanks, Brian. Chris?
Can you just
Hello.
swear him in?
How are you? Chris Benegakis, 208 West Main Street, Cary, Illinois.
Do you have to swear him in?
No, this isn't a hearing.
Oh, okay. I thought we had to swear him in. I don't want to
Go
miss
ahead.
out.
I was just wondering if you guys have any questions. It seemed Brian did a great job, so thanks, Brian.
Did you want to elaborate on anything he had said or talk more about your future expansion plans?
Sure. Yeah, we're, as he demonstrated here, we're looking to take over right now, initially the first half of the building, due to extraordinary cost of working with a all concrete building. So we're looking to get the brewing operations going, as we've been asked many, many times by the board and people of Cary, when are you going to be brewing? Hopefully by the end of the year, with these funds that allow us to finally open up the brewing side of the business and create a true destination, for the village of Cary. And then in the future, should that all go well, we're planning to use the back half of the space for some additional seating, maybe an extra bar, private event type space, stuff like that, to be able to hold an extra 30 people or whatnot. That's about all I've got.
Okay. Are there any questions for this petitioner?
Are you, what's upstairs? Is it apartments or?
There's a law
There's
office.
apartments on one side, and above the new space, there's office tenants.
Do you think you'll eventually take over that area as well?
Probably not. Who knows? It'll depend. But the floor is not something. It's hard. Logistically, it would be tough to make something like that happen.
Yeah, this looks great. I really like it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah,
How about a rooftop? Just saying.
Rooftop garden.
I kind of mentioned to Chris too that, you guys did a phenomenal job with your whole packet. It's very impressive and I like that you were very methodical about what you've been doing. You've taken the time until you're prepared to go to the next level. You've sought out additional, you've got your first loan from Barrington Bank and Trust. So we know you've looked at that avenue first and now you're coming to us for additional. And this to me is the perfect reason why we have a revolving loan. This is exactly what we want to do is help a business grow within our community. And the idea of you being able to brew, I think is huge. I think it will really make it a nice destination for people to hop off the train and come over and check you guys out. First of all, your food's phenomenal, so it definitely gives you that downtown vibe down there. The food you serve, everything. It's just very, you guys have done a really good job, so I'm very impressed with it, and I definitely support this.
Thank you very much.
Is there any, Trustee Kraus?
Same thing. I
Like
echo
it.
what you said, yeah. Looks great.
Trustee Costler? Anything?
I don't have a question for the petitioner, just Jake, and I'm just getting confused now with the revolving loan fund, and I should have asked this earlier today, and I apologize because I was not withholding it and just trying to, it just popped into my head, but I thought the revolving loan fund monies were put into the capital improvement fund.
No, those were not moved.
Okay, so we are keeping them in the revolving loan fund.
Correct.
And then, so our capital improvement fund is at what, about 200,000 now?
Well, the capital improvement fund, it really depends where we end this fiscal year, about what that number is going to be, but plus or minus a few $100,000. Yeah. There was discussion by the village board here about potentially moving the revolving loan fund dollars over to the capital fund or other funds, but there wasn't a formal action that was made by the village to move those funds. So the dollars are still available here.
Okay.
Trustee Betts?
I like what I see.
Trustee Whitehammer?
Yeah, I really enjoyed reading your 59-page proposal. I could tell that you guys have so much passion. I could feel the passion as I was reading it, and I'm excited for you guys as I was reading it. I did really enjoy it. So you did a great job. Great job.
Consent agenda for next board meeting?
Yes.
I'd like it as items for separate action.
Okay.
Thank you.
Consent, never mind. You just answered my question. We'll be up for a vote next board meeting.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Back to Brian, you are just the man of the hour.
It's a recurrent theme.
Discussion regarding the end use of the Lafarge Meyer material gravel pit.
Thank you, Mayor. This is an item that was requested recently, I believe by Trustee Coster wanted to have a discussion on the end use for the gravel pit once the village takes ownership of the property next year. A few items through the zoning process last year. We had retained a consultant, Hitchcock Design Group, to work with the village and came up with a couple of schematic plans or plans for the site that were utilized through the zoning process that could be given to Lafarge and for the final planning for the facility. There were two plans that were presented. The one I'm showing here is the reclamation plan. This is the state in which the village will be deeded the property next year. Lafarge is required to construct a 15-foot wide path around the property. The exact location, as presented earlier this evening, may change from what this plan was at, basically due to the contours of the property. When we developed the plan last year, their aerial photographs had, or survey work had 5-foot intervals for the grading plan. We've now gone to 1-foot intervals through the consultants, so we know exactly how the grades are out there. And by putting the path in certain locations may cause more long-term maintenance issues or hazards with it being close to the water and the steepness of slopes that are there and older portions of the pit that were mined before Kerry's approval and when it was on the Algonquin portion of the lake. So the path configuration may change slightly, but in general, there will be a 15-foot path around the entire perimeter of the lake. Parking lot and entrance road would be constructed off of Clausen Road that provide access to the facility and would provide adequate parking for anybody that wanted to utilize the facility from that standpoint. With this plan, essentially this is a state that we will receive it in. Basically, it'll be completed park. They'll seed the property with natural vegetation, wildflowers, things along those lines, so that the slopes will be stabilized and maintained and limit the impacts for the village to maintain the property going forward. One other plan that Hitchcock designed for us, or went through a planning effort, was to look at ways in which, should the village want to pursue additional development of the property, what type of programming might be available for the site based off other gravel pits that are in the area or across the country. You're starting to see a lot of adaptive reuse of those facilities for park and recreational purposes. So the original plan, as we will receive it, it will be in a park state. It will be basically a 100+ acre park with a walking path through that area, landscaping with areas where there will be vistas and viewing that you can have that will approach down to the water surface, so residents or visitors of the facility could enjoy the lake that will be present on the property. The schematic design here took that the next step and looked at ways in which you can further improve the property to add other recreational uses out there, specifically looking at locations for a potential beach and what type of structures would be related to that, as far as maintenance buildings, other shelters, as far as, picnic shelters. I think, in looking at, other recreation uses, a Frisbee golf course or a dirt path or dirt bike type path through the property. Not to say that these are specifically what should go in these locations, but this is to show that there are opportunities that, may exist in the future should the village want to pursue additional programming here, and then, through discussions at the board level, determine, funding mechanisms or what the cost would be to do those types of improvements. So this schematic plan was developed to provide a plan that we can provide to Lafarge for how they can grade the site so that there would be the ability to install these types of improvements in the front or in the future. So looking at the northwest corner of the site where the beach area and parking lot are shown on this slide, Hitchcock, our consultant, developed it and looked at what grading would be required in those areas for a future improvement, so that when Lafarge is doing their mining operations this year and the reclamation of the activity of the property, they'll leave it in a state so that there won't be massive grading that would be required by the village to modify the ground to accommodate those types of improvements. But there'll be areas that'll be relatively flat that would allow for improvements to be performed on them without significant future costs of the village, should we decide to do additional improvements from that standpoint. Another note, which is in the staff report, and goes back to a comment earlier as far as coordination with the Village of Algonquin. We have had some discussions with them regarding the portion of the property which is in the Village of Algonquin, and potentially modifying our boundaries between the two communities so that that portion may be disconnected from Algonquin and then re-annexed into the Village of Cary. With our unique border that we have there and the uniqueness that we have with a lot of open space on the southwest portion of the Village of Cary, and then also the northeast portion of the Village of Algonquin with gravel pits that are coming to an end. We've submitted a joint application with the Village of Algonquin for a CMAP local technical assistance program that can help with coordinating planning efforts amongst our two communities, that would look at how we can connect to our downtown areas for pedestrian connectivity, conservation district areas, Fox Bluff, conservation property, and then the the 3 mire pits that are in the area, as far as what the end uses of those would be and how they would interact and connect together once everything is mining is completed there in the upcoming years. So that's a kind of a future project. If the grant program is accepted by CMAP, that would be a future item for just approval by the village board to execute that agreement. But essentially, go back, this slide shows what the property will be deeded to the Village of Cary by this time next year, by June 1st next year. We will own the property with a walking path, parking lot, provide access to the site. But I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have regarding the proposed plans or additional discussion regarding the end use of the property.
Thanks, Brian. I owe you an apology, just because I didn't really mean to take it in this direction. Even that was a great presentation, and I'm sorry that you compiled all that, because I really was looking more for a discussion on budgetary things and whether we are going to run this as a village, as our park, or maybe the park district, or maybe we sell it. Yeah. So I wanted it on record, and I think maybe what we should be looking at is either having some sort of workshop or executive session so that we have some sort of plan for the future for this land, because as it stands right now, we don't know, and especially with our strained budget, how would operating this affect that budget? So maybe the sale of this property could help that strained budget, and we should all be formulating a consensus on that now for next year when we acquire it. So.
Yeah, I have a few things to say on that. I guess his presentation was a good segue for your questions then here. So, and good background here for the village board then too. Right now, I guess what I would recommend here is that, this, what you have before you, this is what we know what we're going to get. On the bottom right-hand side, we're going to have a parking lot. There's going to be a path that's around the property. It's going to be more of a passive recreational use out there. We have, as the board knows, our Land Conservancy Fund, dollars to maintain this site here. So I think the first order of business is to, get the property. We're continuing here, Director Simmons and Director Morimoto to work with representatives from Lafarge and Meyer Material here to make sure that we have a path that we like. But again, the first order of business is to accept that property in January 1 of 2018. I think when we get that, we can.
June 1.
Oh, excuse me, June. Not January, June. January's too quick. We get the property in June of 2018, and we can kind of assess the lay of the land, how much it's going to cost us here as far as, mowing and other exercises out there. We have dollars to fund that here, but I think we just take a breath from that standpoint here. At that time, then we can talk about, do we want to have conversations with the park district here and see, is the Park District interested in it? It's been, kind of a lightning rod issue here, the Meyer Material property, and I'm not sure, from what I've discussed here previously with the executive director, they have, the Park District, they have their properties too that they're trying to plan for, and so I think the timing's probably not exactly right if that's something that the board wants to do in a future date, to reach out to the Park District here about, some kind of arrangement where they would program or take property. That's something that we can do. But what I would recommend is we, get to the point where we can accept the property, kind of take a breath, assess, costs, and the board decides, what exactly we want to do.
Okay. I'm a little bit of a different opinion that we should plan ahead for it, but that's fine. But could we at least come up with some sort of budget as to how much is it's going to cost us per year? Yes, to maintain it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what I kind of mentioned earlier too, I still think that this is a time that we talk about whether we're going to annex it from Algonquin, because they were willing to do that. I think that makes an impact on, do we have to manage all that, or if we don't annex it, are they going to maintain that? We need to,
I think that offer's still on the table with them.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
from
you
a-
said you've already talked to them, and you're going to talk with them again,
Yeah,
so.
and I will say, from an annexation standpoint, we will own the property.
Okay.
So, that we've had discussions, and they were open to the concept as far as the modification of the boundary lines in that area. Essentially, we will own the property, so there won't be any maintenance from their standpoint. We would just own property in another village unless we do the disconnect and annexation.
Okay.
The conversations, the previous administrator had met with their village manager about it.
Right.
And there was, a request for us to, potentially take on Clausen Road.
Right.
And I'm not in support of that
Yeah.
at all. And I understand that we'd love, since we own it, we'd prefer it to all be in the village of Cary, but I'm not at all interested to, put us in a compromised position here just to have the property, within the village of Cary. So we own it and it's in Algonquin. Okay, if we want to put a dock in, we go over to Algonquin and get a permit.
Sure.
But again, I want to, have a conversation with the village manager there, and I approached him about reaching out to him and setting up a meeting to talk to him about it. So.
Okay. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Discussion regarding amending various provisions of the municipal code relating to water meter access.
Mike, if you could step up here. Just want to give a brief overview here of where this is coming from for the village board's knowledge. We have, as the village board is aware, we're in the process here of changing out numerous water meters, all our water meters within the village. I think that we plan to have this completed by around 2020, a huge project for the village, but it will make us much more efficient as far as how we read water meters. The ordinance here before you is a little bit tighter language that we have worked with Attorney Tappendorf on. One of the issues that we've run into recently here as we've changed out meters is that there's a few residents that are out there that they don't want to provide access to their property. And they have told us that directly, that they will not provide Public Works direct access to their property. Right now, our previous village code, our current village code, does not allow us the ability to turn off their water after providing several notices. This ordinance that's before you would allow us to turn off their water. Certainly, this would be after numerous notices that we provide to the residents, but you have understood through the conversations that we've had here previously of how much more efficient we will be by having the new water meters and how important that is to the village of Cary. And so this is very few residents. This just provides us with a little more oomph to be able to get in and do what we need to do for the best interest of the whole village. So I'll have Assistant Director Walsh, if he has any other information that he can add here for background.
Yeah, the village did have certain ordinances that dealt with the water meter system, and people's responsibilities, the village's responsibilities. Those ordinances were written a long time ago when water didn't have much value. That's not the case today. Water back then was kind of a side note. So there wasn't any need for, more specific ordinances. This just kind of fills in some gaps. And as Administrator Wright said, that most of the village residents have been very responsive and cooperative. But there have been residents out there that have simply said, no, you're not going to come in the house for whatever reason that might be. And we haven't pushed the issue up until now because there's so many meters out there, we've got plenty of work to do. But we're getting to the point now where we have certain subdivisions where there might only be a handful of houses left, and we still have to send people over there to read the meters manually, as opposed to just hit the button on the computer and read them with all the other ones. So it's just a move forward, kind of crossing the T's on some ordinances that should be in place anyway. So.
What do you think their main objection is for going in the house and changing out the meter?
I really don't know. There doesn't seem to be a lot of logic behind it at times. There is, occasionally I'll take a call from a resident that talks about the intrusion of the electronic meters. The Commonwealth Edison and the gas company are both dealing with upgrading their meters also. And then there's the radio wave issue at times with people. But if you were with us when we started the process, we kind of considered that. And one of the reasons we chose the meters we chose is because the meters are not talking all the time. They're not communicating constantly. They only turn on when we actually send a signal from the computer. The radio wakes, the meters wake up for 15 minutes, they send the signal back and they go back to sleep. So there's not a constant communication. And when I'm able to explain that to some of the people who are concerned about the radio issues, it seems to kind of solve that problem. So
I think some of it too is just people don't want to have government come in their house.
Right.
House, yeah. Government
I mean,
intrusion.
So here's
So-
my other question. Is another option possibly those people who are the refusals, charge them higher fees for having that person actually come over and do the inspection, rather than making it where you're shutting off their water, a necessity, maybe fining them each month that extra fee?
I mean, we could look at that with our attorneys.
A fine is one of the options for not granting access, but allowing people to opt out effectively and require the manpower to go individually and read the meter defeats the purpose of the efficiency gains that you looked for in adopting these meters.
I'm just looking at the privacy aspect. If people don't want the government, inside their home, but then they pay
Well, I mean,
for that.
To respond to that type of situation, this will result in a short, finite invasion of privacy in exchange for routine invasions of privacy where they have to read the meter all the time.
Yeah.
So this is a short-term interruption where they have to replace the meter, get it working, and then after that, it's automated, it's remote.
Yeah.
There's no need to come back.
I just wonder if you gain more voluntary compliance doing it that way as opposed to cutting off their water. I mean, I would have no problem someone coming into my house and putting this water meter in. I have no problem at all, but I could understand why maybe somebody would.
Yeah, I think that's why we're asking to have that ability to terminate their water service, if that's what we need to do. Again, this is, it's not something that's going to take long. I mean, how long does a typical water meter change out?
20 minutes.
Okay.
20 minutes is the
What is our non-compliance ratio rate? Where are we with non-compliance?
Minimal.
Anyone have any idea about approximately how much?
Just as an example, we targeted Fox Trail subdivision early on. They were, because they had some of the oldest meters.
Sure.
And that's one of the reasons that we are doing this, not because we want to invade homes.
Right.
The meters have outlived their life expectancies.
Right.
They're not metering in all of the water anymore.
And please understand,
Agree.
I know that and
Yeah,
I trust
okay,
that.
okay.
I definitely do.
But
Again, I'd have no problem.
just to give an example, in all of Fox Trails, we have everything done with the exception of probably 5 meters.
Okay.
So
And
it's not a
Right.
very widespread.
I just think you need to have the, and I agree, it's the last resort is to obviously turn off water, but I think you need to have the tools necessary to get the efficiency up and going for multiple reasons.
This is a very common ordinance.
Okay.
Most
So a lot of
municipalities have the ability
okay.
to do this.
Okay. Makes sense.
Jeff, any questions on that?
No, fine.
Jim? Consent agenda?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Planning staff, Mike.
Yeah. Hold on, we're going to talk about mosquitoes.
Right.
Are you, I'll go ahead.
You wanna start it?
Yeah, yeah. We had a request here from trustee Cavelli just to talk about mosquito abatement here, and Public Works has done a good job putting together some information here and some background of what we currently do here right now in the village and what some options would be available for us. So Mike is going to give a little bit of overview what Public Works does right now, just within, our limited resources here that we try to control the mosquito population. I do have before you too, we were able to get a price here from Clark Mosquito, which a bunch of the area communities have used. It is pretty significant when you look at it here. Certainly not anything, since we haven't included this in our budget, that I'll be recommending, but this is good information here that when we get to our budget time here this coming March, it's something that we can talk about if the board wants to include it, in the budget for next year. So I'll turn it over to Mike and he can kind of give an overview of what we do right now.
Standard mosquito control programs are multifaceted. They involve trapping mosquitoes, getting counts, doing inventory, testing mosquitoes, documenting with GIS all of the wetlands and puddles and floodplains that might breed mosquitoes. Then there are controlling larvae, using larvicides in different areas, whether it's storm basins, inlets, ponds, small floodplains even, drainage ditches that may hold water. And then there's the actual targeting of adult mosquitoes with sprays. In meeting with the representatives from Clark Environmental, who does multiple towns in the area, Crystal Lake, Lake in the Hills, they indicated to me that 90% of their work, and that was their number, involves dealing with the larvae and not the adult mosquitoes. Targeting larvae, using larvicides, whether it's with backpacks, spraying ponds, larger ponds, they have to do aerial spray. Also, they drop on the ponds with larvicides. You do some of the same things that we are currently doing. We use briquettes in all of the storm sewers in town, in the inlets, which is where standing water attracts the floodplain mosquitoes. So this is what we have currently done and we've done for years. The decision was made by prior administrations that they thought that was sufficient. If you can attack the larval stage and don't allow the breeding of the mosquitoes, you make more of an impact. The quote that we got from Clark talked about aerial spraying as a component, and just as an example, a price for one treatment in Cary would be about $4,400 for one spray. The spraying is fairly effective. Many towns do it, but it's only a small portion of what actually needs to be done. The Park District, to complicate issues just a bit, in Cary, the Park District actually owns the majority of the ponds in town. The village does not. The village only owns 2 ponds, the Cimarron ponds on Cary Algonquin Road. All of the other detention ponds in town are dry bottom detention ponds. So they're not conducive to breeding, mosquitoes breeding. So
Yeah, happy to answer any questions that the village board has about this.
Well, and given the cost, I mean, it's significant. And one of the items we talked about on break, just so you guys are all aware, is possibly a cost sharing next year, maybe with the park district. The other question I had was, we do cost sharings with Salt, with other towns. I mean, is it possible if all these other towns are doing something, we can look at maybe getting some sort of reduced rate if we're partnering with other neighboring agencies? And again, this would be something for next year we'd budget for. So there's no immediacy to it, but I think it's good information to have and something to consider.
Yeah, we can certainly look at that. So,
Good MPI project. Thanks, Michael.
thanks, Mike.
Discussion on a recusal and conflict of interest policy.
Just a brief background here and turn it over to trustee Weinhammer then. Trustee Weinhammer had requested here that the village board discuss a policy here regarding what I'll call recusal / conflict of interest policy. I had reached out to Attorney Tappendorf to see if there was any kind of similar ordinances that she was aware of. She wasn't aware of anything that was specific related to Trustee Weinhammer's request, but she was able to send over a sample code of ethics, here from the Village of Glencoe that doesn't exactly address all the issues I think that Trustee Weinhammer is looking to address, but it's just a sample here for the village board to review and consider. And so that's kind of the background that staff has done. And I don't know if there's anything that Trustee Weinhammer would like to add to spur the discussion here.
No, I would like to look at adopting a policy to go ahead and have something set in stone on recusing oneself if there's a conflict of interest. I know in the past, just since I've been on the board, two trustees have asked another trustee to recuse themselves and they didn't think there was a conflict of interest. So I thought if we had some parameters in place, it would make it easier. I was talking with another community today and they said that actually tonight at their village board meeting, they have a business owner that is recusing themselves because there's a liquor license that's up for getting, and that business owner has a liquor license. And he's like, just because I have a liquor license, I want to recuse myself. I don't want to be voting on if another business gets a liquor license. And I was like, wow, so I felt like in that instance, I didn't even think that they would recuse themselves, but I just thought it would be good to have parameters in place, especially when some people have concerns about voting and things like that.
So certainly want to just get village board committee feedback here. And, if this is something we'd all like to proceed with, I'd work with Attorney Simon on drafting something to be considered.
Do we have anything currently in place? I mean, I know in the past, when Trustee Kaplan was on the board, he would recuse himself. Do we have anything in terms of our policy currently stating conflict of interest?
I think it's pretty similar to the state guidelines.
I think it is, the state adopts state guidelines.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would be interested in having a policy similar to Glencoe's.
I think it's important that we have a far-reaching discussion then if we're going to go into conflicts of interest, because the state has a pretty narrow interpretation as to what they consider a conflict of interest. And Attorney Simon, please jump in if I'm incorrect here, Adam at all. But the conflict, the statute, as I was informed, indicated that you had to show a monetary, you have to have a financial gain, you have to have some financial component to it for it to be a conflict of interest. I guess, my concern is I believe that this came up because of me being a volunteer on the Chamber of Commerce, where I am not compensated. I am not receiving any reduced rate for anything, but I'm simply a volunteer for an organization within our village that looks to help support business owners. I think if we're going to have a conversation and we're looking at conflicts of interest, it I do believe it can be what I would consider a little bit of a slippery slope, because what's going to constitute when it's a true conflict of interest? Because we could be in a position where we have, I look at overall and I say things like our school district boards, and they have teachers that are on those boards. So how in the world can a school teacher be on a school board when they're a teacher in that same school district? And yet they're able to do that. And I'm, just hear me out for a minute.
Okay.
I want to, and I don't have a problem. I think that they can do that. It would be similar to saying, hey, you can't be on it because your kid goes to that school and you're paying tax dollars in it, and you can't make a decision. I think we need to have if we're going to delve into this, it needs to be a very healthy, thorough discussion about what constitutes a conflict of interest. And then Jeff, jump in.
Okay.
I'm sure there'll be more to discuss, but that's kind of where I'm at with it to start it
A
off.
school board member can't be employed by the district that they're employed in. So if I work for 26,
Right.
if I ran for 26 school board, I would have to
Right.
resign my position
Sure.
as a teacher.
Sure.
But I can be on the District 155 board.
True,
And
but
so-
I'm saying you can get into a point where we're having a discussion about, gosh, you're all in the same retirement system, therefore, decisions that you make could impact what that retirement's going to be for you, and it can be very far-reaching. I just think that the reason that the state has a statute and it has set up parameters as to what a conflict of interest is just for this type of situation, to make sure that everybody's protected.
And I would say we can't control what other boards do, but we can't control our board.
Sure
So
we can.
I would focus just on our board. I wouldn't worry about what other boards are doing as far as school boards. Here, Ellen, are you a member of the chamber, a paying member of the chamber
Yes,
for your
I am.
business?
Yes.
Okay. Here's the issue I have,
Mhm.
is that when you vote on chamber issues and you're a paying member of the chamber, by being a paying member, you receive direct benefits from the chamber, correct? Otherwise, what's the purpose of paying? I don't know.
The purpose is to support your local businesses
Okay,
and your
but
community.
you're paying for a service that you're receiving, correct?
I don't know that I receive a service, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't know what service it
So
would be.
what is the
I can tell you, I've never, ever, in my over 20 years, I've never received a direct referral from the chamber for anything, for my business. I do it more as an opportunity to support our local businesses, as I've done for the last over 20 years.
Okay, so I would question why businesses join the chamber. A lot of times they join the chamber, maybe they get extra marketing, they get some sort of benefit. Otherwise, what is the purpose of paying for the chamber? This is my opinion. So then if you're voting on chamber members and you're giving money to the chamber, I'm not saying this is you personally, but from an outsider looking in, it could be like, you do me a favor, I'll do you a favor. And I think that's what we need to avoid. We need to avoid people having that perception.
Sure.
That's my opinion.
And I think that if that were happening, that everyone would have the right to call me out on something like that, or
But how do
anybody
we-
else for that matter.
But we
For
don't
example,
know.
Jeff talking about Bruce Kaplan, there was a direct financial benefit to that.
Well, there's
He was marketing a
potential
property.
for an indirect benefit. There's a potential, maybe you do get that extra referral over somebody else. I don't know, but I would hate the fact that you're in that position, that I would even wonder that.
Well, I guess I kind of look at it and I say that, you know what, this is something that's disclosed. It's not something that people aren't aware of, that I'm a member of it. It's not something I hid when I ran for office and I was elected for this position. Perhaps there's people in the business community that supported me because they felt like, hey, we would like someone that has a business acumen representing us on the board. And what you're saying to me is that I'm trying to figure out why you would want my voice silenced when I'm elected just like the rest of you.
I'm not saying that we want to silence you. I don't think anybody, and I can't speak for anybody but myself, I'm not trying to silence you. But like even in this verbiage here from Glencoe, it says interest in the transaction before the board, commission, or committee on which an officer serves as a member. So in the event that National Night Out was asking for money, let's say I wasn't even sitting on that committee, I'm just a member of National Night Out, I wouldn't be able to vote if National Night Out gets money then. And I think that's perfectly fine, because how could I really go ahead and, look at the members that I work with and like say that I wouldn't vote in favor of something that, I volunteer with, and that's just even a volunteering. And so I thought that this verbiage here from Glencoe was really interesting. And I mean, how could you really vote no for something either? I mean, if you're sitting on a board with somebody and they come before us and ask for money, I mean, how are you going to vote no for that? I just don't think that you can make neutral decisions based upon, what you're involved in.
Adam, I have a question for Adam. The state statute as far as conflict of interest and defining that, is it that there is a conflict of interest or the possibility of a conflict of interest?
So the statute that applies, there's two of them. There's one in the municipal code and there's one generally applicable statute called the Public Officers Prohibited Activities Act. And those statutes prohibit direct pecuniary conflicts of interest. Those are the strict conflicts, per se conflicts. The law also recognizes informal conflicts of interest, common law conflicts of interest that aren't defined by statute, but which create the appearance of impropriety. Not necessarily is,
Right.
There isn't necessarily any impropriety going on,
But
it creates
looks
the
like there
appearance.
might be.
Those are not regulated by statute. Those are some of the circumstances I think I've heard people comment on about wanting to evaluate whether or not that's something that should be disclosed affirmatively or affect whether or not a trustee can or cannot vote.
Okay. I support going forward with this. In fact, I recused myself from a simple vote. My daughter went to the school, to Trinity Oaks, and there was a vote on the simple sign for the school.
This is an area that is frequently misunderstood because anything that a trustee gets benefit from on the same terms that the public benefits from is not a conflict of interest. So if your daughter was a student at the school and you're similarly situated with everyone else at the school and you don't benefit incrementally more than anyone else at the school, I wouldn't characterize that as a conflict of interest. So it's difficult to distinguish sometimes between incidental benefits that you get because you happen to be a member of a class completely unrelated to sitting on the board versus circumstances where there's a closer relationship that could create a perception problem.
Okay. I guess we all have our own different levels of ethics. So I support going forward on this. And yeah, that's my position.
I'd like to see what the state, what do we have in place currently? I'd like to see the ordinance and what we have in the code.
Yeah, I was going to say, see, Delvey, I know that Julie was able to come up with this, but seeing what other municipalities have, what they're working on, and what, I'd like to find out exactly what some of the hard definitions are of conflicts of interest. In perusing over this, it seems to be mostly financial. There must be some sort of financial gain. So if that's the bottom line, if there's a financial gain to be had, that's the big conflict of interest. But yeah, I'd be interested in moving this forward.
I think it would be hard to find out or to pinpoint conflict of interest because a lot of us are involved in a lot of different things. I have no problem with having something written down, but I think it would be very hard to pinpoint what you volunteer for and what you stand behind. And so I would be really with words that we really would need to look into and really find out what the state has to say and what is written down.
With regard to your concern, it says here, just an example, may impair his or her independence of judgment or action in the performance of his or her official duties. So if it's impairing your judgment because you're part of that organization or things like that, you think that, you're going to be having to vote yes or no, or you're going to get the perception from the community like that, you're on the chamber and you're voting to give them finances or anything like that. I think it makes it pretty clear in this ethic statement here.
come up to the mic.
David Miller, Lake Julian, 65 Highway 14. Maybe the same thing like Jeff and Jennifer can vote on Maplewood School because they both work for the school, which would benefit their boss, their bottom dollar. It gets very slippery.
If you had asked me to recuse myself because of that, and you didn't want me to make a decision because of that, I would respect you, and I would say that's the perception of the community then, and I would go ahead and recuse myself. I wouldn't want the community to ever think that I am making a decision that's impartial, and so I would definitely go ahead and listen to an
Do you think you
objection.
would be able to vote for Supper Maplewood too?
I would not recuse myself. I can look at it objectively and make a decision.
So now you got difference on the board there too, whether you should or shouldn't.
That's why I think
it's
it's
a
important
slippery
that we have
slope. If it's
ethics.
financial gains, which I don't think you get financial gains being a teacher or assistant or anything else or to it, but if it's a financial gain, like you're voting on your own business or something, I think you're kind of getting petty. I think you should read, if it's a financial gain, it's a financial gain. Just my opinion.
I think what I've heard is that we can do more to educate you about what would fall within the different tiers of conflict. So you have more information about what statutes may or may not be triggered. And maybe that would be a starting point, just to let you know what is and is not a conflict.
I think that might be a good thing too. Mayor, when you said you wanted to move forward with this, what are you looking for in terms of other examples that are
yeah,
out
I'd like
there
to-
and kind of compare it with what the state has?
I'd like to see.
That's what I'm kind of thinking
Yeah, I'd
too.
like the full definition of everything that the state is looking for, plus any other communities that are like us that are looking to tighten things up and make sure that we fly right. I don't have a problem with that whatsoever, as long as everybody's on the same page.
And I just want to make sure that it's clear that everyone knows, I want it for the record, that I did consult this. I did ask about it. So it wasn't something that I just lightly went into. I said, let me ask whether or not this is. I was told it was not. I was within the state's narrow interpretation of what it was. And therefore, I felt that I would be doing a disservice for a lot of people that elected me if I didn't vote. You know, that a lot of people that knew that and knew that I'm part of these types of organizations or businesses. I think that just tonight is a perfect example. I didn't have a problem with looking at the owners of Kojaks and saying, you know, our system, I didn't sit there and say, oh no, we got to do it. You know, we've said as a board, here's what we're going to do. We need to reevaluate. We need to look at that. That's someone that's part of the Chamber of Commerce. On the flip side, when I read this stuff, there's some stuff again that, and I can only go by what was posted, but what I read was, if adopted, trustee Jennifer Weinhammer's proposal will require that any board member with a social, financial, or political relationship with any entity or owner of an entity that comes before the board would be required to recuse themselves from any vote on issues presented. That to me is a slippery slope. Everybody here has social relationships with people. That's saying, in other words, what you find out someone voted for someone else and therefore you can't support them?
No, that's
We should
right.
be able to, I'm just saying how I read this, Jennifer. I'm not saying you didn't write this. This wasn't you that wrote this. You just commented on it. But people have social, they have, you know, they have political relationships with people all the time. So, I mean, anyone that comes before this board is going to either have voted yes for you or voted no for you. Your job is to say, you know what? Even all those people that voted no for me, I have to look at them objectively and represent everybody, 18,000 people. I can't sit there and say, oh gosh, I know this person didn't vote for me, therefore I'm going to shoot them down.
I think at the next meeting here, we'll bring back some information about what we currently have and have Attorney Simon or Attorney Tappendorf be able to provide information on what we currently have and educate the village board.
And since we're talking about financials, can we define then direct, which is obvious, but the indirect piece as well?
What would you consider an indirect
Well,
piece?
that's why I would like further clarification on that, because my definition may be completely different than what's out there.
I'll certainly work with the attorneys on trying to develop a presentation that they'll be able to provide to the village board and hopefully help answer some of the questions that you have.
I think that's one of the big issues that we have, though, is that indirect, how do we determine? Like you said, you have a completely different opinion maybe than what I would have. Personally, I didn't feel that Ellen had a conflict of interest in voting for that
Yeah, I
grant.
did.
And see, I didn't.
Right.
So
Yeah.
there we have our differences right there.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll gather the information and report back. timeliness, depending upon what's on future agenda? I mean, it may take a meeting or two to come back. Is it that pressing that, I mean, again, back to agenda management, what's more pressing? Like, this is a very beefy agenda. Do we want to continue having really beefy agendas or spread it out a little bit more? Is what,
I think we could get some information maybe through emails and then look at it down the line, like send us something, an attachment.
okay, with regards
some
to information
on it, and then
found?
we can kind of look at it, maybe talk one-on-one with each other or something, and then
Maybe.
decide where we want to go.
Yeah, Jeff, maybe, Jake, you could send us a list of prioritized items, and we could decide if this needs to go on the next agenda or the one after or whatever.
Well, that gets kind of tough because then we've
Everyone's
got,
different.
people have different opinions about items. I mean, I'm going to do my best and, try to, I've got a list of 7 items here that we need to discuss and, try to move them forward. I think the village board is interested in discussing this topic. I mean, it was evident tonight. So I'll work with Attorney Simon and Attorney Tappendorf and have them, be prepared to provide the board an update here as soon as we can.
And when will are we going to have a meeting on the 1st?
Yeah,
We were
I'm
gonna
planning on having a meeting on the
will,
1st.
okay.
Village board, we've got some village board business that I want to get to. There may be the opportunity to cancel the committee of the whole meeting just so that we can get folks down to National Night Out. But we do have business to attend to from the village board level.
All right, has anything changed in the department head since the committee meeting or the village board meeting? One thing I've been neglecting doing for a while, I'm going to point out Courtney Sage here, who is our new Public Works Management Analyst. Would you like to stand up so the rest of the board can see who you are? She is becoming an intricate part of the Public Works Department, so we welcome you to the village.
Yeah, Courtney did a lot of stuff related to mosquitoes for us here, so she's handling a lot of tasks and has done a great job down in our Public Works Department, so we're happy to have her here.
Okay, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.